Ramesh Srinivasan is professor at the UCLA School of Education and Information Studies. He joins us from Los Angeles. Welcome to the programme. And this does seem to be an issue that has bipartisan support in Congress, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, it's actually, for me, actually fairly good news that we see Josh Hawley and Lindsey Graham on the one side, on the really in the same position as Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois. And I think a lot of that is because it's pretty difficult for any politician to not sort of claim to be supportive of children and youth safety, right, for various reasons. And we have seen across the board congressional representatives, independent of what party they are part of, express a lot of concern about the directions big technology platforms, specifically social media platforms, have taken. And as we've talked about before on Al Jazeera, the content that tends to be most visible and therefore most viral on these platforms often tends to be that which is most hateful, outrageous, or conspiratorial. And that's not because the tech CEOs or engineers are reviewing every single piece of content that's posted. It's totally impossible. But they're simply building simple algorithms, which are rules applied to bodies of data, that say, hey, whatever is likely to grab eyeballs and attention, make that go viral. So visibility and speech is all about virality. And that has everything to do with the invisible rules that govern what we see and what we don't see. And, as your story just alluded to, because of Section 230, which is from the Communications Decency Act, it protects tech platforms and social media platforms from liability, unlike all of you at Al Jazeera or the New York Times and so on, who can't print or show content that's deliberately libelous, slanderous, hateful, etc.
Right. So let me just ask you that. I mean, tech companies say they do a lot to take abusive content down, but do they do enough to stop material going up in the first place?
Not at all. They don't. And in terms of taking content down, what they do is hire what we call content moderators. These are often populations not in the United States. They're not paid living wages. They're not trained journalists. They're not necessarily people even representing, the youth constituencies, if you will. They're not experts on these issues. We're often talking about exploited workers in places like the Philippines and other parts of the world who are being exposed constantly, like thousands and thousands upon pieces a day of content that's hateful, heinous, graphic, violent, and so on. So these people are contracting PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in other parts of the world. And these tech companies are monetizing and exploiting the valuation of all of this in the same time. So what these tech companies can do instead is invest in really supporting constituencies that can help design these algorithms so that the most hateful content is not always what goes most viral, push greater liability upon those of us who are posting hateful content. There's a ton of things they can do, but what we hear from Zuckerberg and others again and again, oh yeah, we'll just do better next time. We'll do better AI, whatever that means.
Let me ask you this, though. Let me ask you this, though. I mean, some people might say that actually it should be down to parents and guardians to stop their children viewing harmful content. Is that a fair comment?
It's totally unrealistic, right? I mean, many young people are born with these digital technologies. During the pandemic, many young people, 4 or 5 years old, were using different digital technologies and social media. It's part of the world, right? If we want to participate in the world, we have to participate in digital platforms and services. You can't even sometimes get accounts or logins to things except through a Facebook or Instagram account, right? So I don't like pushing the burden on all of us who are already overstressed, overwhelmed informationally and otherwise. Instead, the liability must shift, and more importantly, responsibility and accountability and governance to these technology companies that are the wealthiest companies in the history of the world. They don't need to do so while wildly exploiting us around the planet. And this is even more true for populations in the global south, in Africa, South America, South Asia, and so on.
Well, indeed, you mentioned other areas there. Let me just ask you, how would any further regulation work across international borders when it comes to the internet?
Well, it can't. Regulation has to be done based on the sovereignty of particular states or the polity associated with particular domains. Of course, groups like the United Nations, World Health Organization can publish advisory pieces on such. But I think it's very telling right now, as we speak, in the Senate, we have bipartisan senators discussing bills and policy proposals that will carve out away from full Section 230 immunity to actually try to protect targeted groups. And mind you, this is not merely a question of children. This is also involving racism, sexism, all sorts of forms of discrimination. So it's high time, if you're going to monetize all this content and be the wealthiest companies in the history of the world, use algorithms or exploited content moderators to make your bucks through valuation, to be also responsible. So they got to invest in being transparent and truly collaborative with the public sector and public interest.
OK, we'll leave it there. Srinivasan, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.